Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bookish, your virtual program on authors, thinkers, and the literary life produced by the Southern California News Group. I'm Sam Dunn. I'm the senior editor of premium content here at the News Group. Before we begin, I need to thank all of you who are Reader Reward subscribers for supporting this program, and really all of you who come back month after month. We really appreciate it. If you are a Reader Rewards member attending tonight, you're automatically entered to win a $50 gift certificate to our partner and a great indie bookstore, Once Upon a Time Bookstore in Montrose. And I have to say congratulations to the winner last month, Christine Armstrong. Christine, I hope you're enjoying those books. And you know, if you're not a subscriber yet, why aren't you a subscriber yet? Please go to scng.com/subscribe to find your local paper. And that way you'll know all of the great things we've got going on. And we really do have a lot of great things going on. Also, if you've missed any of our past programs, go to scng.com/virtual program and check those out. Also, check out our really cool Bookish swag. It's a great holiday gift idea, if we do say so ourselves. And before we get started, let me remind you that if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature on your Zoom toolbar. And if you just want to add a comment, use the chat feature found there on your screen too. And don't worry, if you miss anything, you're going to be sent a link to the program, so you're not going to miss anything. The show is also posted, as I mentioned, at scng.com/virtual events. And that's where you can find all of our past shows as well, and you can see what's coming up. Now, joining us from New York City is our beloved host, author and performer, and playwright, Sandra Singlo. She's in New York because her play Mad Women of the West is playing off Broadway. Sandra, welcome. Are you there? There you are.
I am here. I'm so excited to be here and beam into Southern California, my home away from home, on this particular fantastic day. And I'm so excited.
I know we
about
have
our show today.
We have our first guest lined up. And let me tell you, as you know who this is, but let me tell everybody else, Ed Begley Jr., one of the
I'm getting unmuted. I unmuted myself, and here I am behind me. I'm quite young, and now here I am, the real me, looking quite odd.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Well, we just Ed, not only are you a wizard and a genius, but you've been a beloved actor for what, 4 decades?
Yeah, I've been working since 1967. Can you believe it? They're still letting me work. I don't know why, but they have very high standards here.
We know why. We know why. I didn't realize it, but your first TV appearances were on My Three Sons and Mary Hartman, and then of course
Mary Hartman came about a decade or more later. That was 7 years after I started Mary Hartman, but I started with My Three Sons. It was my very first day in show business as a Screen Actors Guild actor. Then next I did a short story called The Lottery. We did a film version of The Lottery, that wonderful
Shirley
short story.
Jackson's Lottery.
Yeah, Shirley Jackson, the great. And then I did an Adam 12, and then I did a show called The Immortal, and I did all this, like Mannix kind of stuff and Beretta and all that stuff over the years. So I did a lot of cop shows.
Well, we first fell in love with you, really fell in love with you with one of your starring roles on Saint Elsewhere. And of course, not to mention all of your films with Jack Nicholson, Meryl Streep, and of course, the great mockumentarian Christopher Guest. And most recently, I have to tell you, my son fell in love with you as the physics professor on Young Sheldon. But just as important, you were an environmentalist before it was fashionable, and your green credentials date back since the 70s, I think. But we're here to talk about you as an author and your memoir, To the Temple of Tranquility, and Step on It. I'm going to let Sandra take over from here. Sandra, après vous, madame.
I'm so excited, and I think that Ed Begley Jr., we all feel that we know you. I think even in Spinal Tap, although you're a drummer who appears only briefly, who died in a bizarre gardening accident. You're on The Simpsons. I think that you're such an everyman, like everyone knows who you are in America. I think in your fantastic memoir, you describe yourself like as a Zelig. Can you talk a little bit about that character Zelig and how you feel it applies to your life?
Well, when I saw that movie, I finally had an explanation for how I got to be all those places I was. Zelig, basically. I would find myself at situations like that character. For those who don't know the Woody Allen movie Zelig, it's a character, it's based on a real person, I believe, that actually existed. You'd see him in the background at Yalta and other important events, the signing of the peace accord and what have you, and all of that. he was always in the background, and everybody wondered how he got there, and he didn't even really know himself. And so that's my situation. I think I might be a little bit more like Forrest Gump or Chauncey Gardner. I might be a little more clueless than Zelig. That's the only difference. I would add a friendly amendment that I might be Forrest Gump or Chauncey Gardner from being there.
So, and I think in your book, you go from, it's such an extraordinary read, unbelievable. You go from hanging out with the Beatles to getting coached by Jack Nicholson. But just as an example, just to give a feel for the book, the Marlon Brando story alone, I wonder if you could share that just as teaser for the book, because it's hilarious and it's so like you in Los Angeles. Can you share a little bit about your Marlon Brando project?
He was a dear friend of mine, and I got invited back, and often, because I figured out the rules early on. The rules were never talk about show business. Do not talk about acting, writing, directing, puppetry, claymation, trained seals, anything that was show business. Don't talk about it. What he did like to talk about was, wind turbines, solar panels, drywall, copper pipe versus steel galvanized pipe, things like that, kind of guy construction site stuff. He liked that stuff, and I like that stuff. I like to build things, and I made furniture, and he loved all that. But one day I get a phone message on my machine, different than all the others in the years I've been going up there. Everything changed in a moment. I listened to the message, and it said, "Ed the Bagel, this is Bran Flakes. Get up here. There's a project. I've wanted to work with you for a while now. I finally have a project we can do together. Of all the financing, of the distribution, get up here, and we're going to do a wonderful, wonderful creative project together." So suddenly he's talking acting. He wants to talk acting. Suddenly he wants to talk about a picture. It's Marlon Brando. He can get something greenlit like that. So I leave my car. I leave my bike at home. I race up there in my car. I don't want Sean Penn to be given the part before I can get up there. So I race up there, and I finally really understood the lettering on the garage that I'd seen for many years. It said, "Stay in your car, honk your horn." And I knew that I usually would ride my bike up, and it'd be a little different to me. I would be silent. They wouldn't hear me coming. But when you were there and you honk your horn, I knew what came next. These giant dogs. When I say dogs, they were more like ponies, or large horses you could compete in dressage with. So I just kind of allowed them to, lick me all over for a while. And then I would walk past the pool, careful not to fall in, because this pool, you didn't want to fall in this pool. It was more an algae pond than a pool. If those gunite walls could talk, I'm sure they'd have a few stories about Marlon and, many other actresses from his era. But I went inside, and he sat down. He said, "Where's your bike helmet?" He noticed right away I didn't have the bike helmet. I said, "Oh, I rode my car up today." He said, "Get me Pat Morrison on the phone. Begley bogus about bike riding. I'm going to ruin you. Then you'll have to do this project with me. Do you know how many volts an electric eel puts out?" I said, "What did you just say? How many volts an electric eel? What part don't you understand? Eels, volts, what?" I said, "Okay, I don't know how many volts, probably a pretty high voltage, but only, a half an amp or something." He said, "Exactly. Electricity, Ohm's law. You're going to be very helpful with this. What's the name of the town down the coast?" "What?" "The town down the coast." "Okay. Huntington Beach, Seal Beach, La Jolla, that's it. You and Joe Brutzman are going to go down there, and you're going to get 70 electric eels. We're going to put them in every home in America." I said, "For what purpose? Like a security system, like a home alarm system? So like a moat with electric eels so people don't have intruders? What do you mean?" He said, "No, we're going to power every home in America with electric eels." "Marlon, what are you talking about? They'd put out maybe a couple hundred volts, but only for a second, and half an amp. You're not going to be able to power anything. You wouldn't light a hobbyist light bulb at a science fair." He just looked at me, because I would always challenge him. And that's another reason I got invited back. I wasn't some sycophant that, "Oh, Marlon, what a good idea. Let's do that." So I said, "You're going to go nowhere with this." He went, "Why is everything no with you? Everything is always no. I've got another idea. I wanted to tell you about your wind turbine. We're going to increase the power by 100%. They had this crazy contraption, like a hearing horn or something. What's that, Sonny? Or a cornucopia or a big funnel in front of my wind turbine." But I suddenly became like Angelica Houston in Spinal Tap, because it was like the Stonehenge model or something. Suddenly I said, "Do you know how big my wind turbine is? It's like 150 feet high. So that would make this funnel 300 feet. You're going to go broke doing it." But he finally did come up with some real inventions that worked. He had one called deep ocean water cooling, and that actually worked. But he had these crazy schemes. He had a patent attorney on retainer at all times. But once again, he'd always say, "Why is everything no with you?" Because I wasn't just a yes man, and he seemed to like that.
I mean, I think picturing Marlon Brando, and your book is so hilarious. And you say, what are you going to put? Ride them like little seahorses, like the eels? It's like, I think it's because you're so open and approachable by so many people, which comes through in your acting, that you have all these adventures. And I think one thing that people should know upon reading your book is you actually give some advice for a living, advice for acting. And I think it's very inspiring. I mean, did you feel after having written this book that there was a journey for you that at the end you felt different sharing this with people, or was it just recounting stories of your life?
Very much an educational experience for me to get all this advice that I got from the people like Alan Watts, who I greatly revered. You know, he really got me to live in the moment and be present and to capture the moments like this one right now, this moment, where if you let it be, you have everything that you need. And then you can go about doing things like helping other people that haven't achieved that level of serenity. You know, people that don't have a roof over their head or don't have a meal. So wonderful, wonderful teacher, Alan Watts. So I got to be able to spread that on to others, as Harry Dean Stanton did with me. You know, I had read some Alan Watts and certainly admired him, but it was Harry Dean Stanton who was like my teacher about such matters, a wonderful actor and a philosopher of sorts, Harry Dean, and he passed it on to me, and I've passed it on to others. And great, great stuff. I suggest everybody read a little bit of Alan Watts. Try the book, This Is It. It's a good start.
And I think and you also talk about your alcoholism and your journey through that. And and I think that when you talk about spirituality and alcoholism, you just have such a sense of humor about it and a sense of presence about it. So if you could actually talk a little bit about that journey from beginning to what you evolved to, and how your body changed at one point, that was just really fascinating. And then where you are now with it. It was such a great journey.
Yeah, I started off, you know, stealing pills from the medicine chest at my parents' home, and that's the way I started, and they eventually caught me at that. I started smoking pot, but I really began in earnest in 1971 I set out to be an alcoholic, Sandra. I really did, because I had seen, you know, all this wonderful work by the British actors, you know, Peter O'Toole and Richard Burton and Anthony Hopkins and all of them, and Oliver Reed. And I heard they're drunk all the time when they were on stage or on movie sets. I went, oh, that's what I'll do. I'll become an alcoholic, then I'll be a great actor. I had no idea that they'd actually trained, and that's why they were good actors. That had nothing to do with alcohol. But I thought that would work for me. If I get good and drunk, I'd be, you know, a better artist.
You were, yeah, like 6 bottles of wine, right? You would have in it. I mean, it was really an extreme amount. And and you did work a lot successfully, at least drinking, and then it changed for you.
Yeah, I drank one time with my friend Nelson Lyon. We bought a case of wine, the 12 in a case. I drank half of it, and he drank half of it, 6 bottles each. And that was the kind of insanity we somehow did back in those days. And I operated a vehicle. I would drink a quart of vodka, have a Quaalude and a half, and drink a bottle of Chardonnay and start driving around LA. I don't recommend that today or at any point. How I didn't kill anybody is something of a miracle. How I didn't go to jail for a DUI, you know, is amazing. They let me off. I kind of look like the guys who stopped me. You know, I was certainly experiencing white privilege before I ever knew what that term meant. And I'd get off, they'd say, okay, you just get yourself home, Eddie, be careful, okay? You're gonna go straight home, right? Oh yes, officer, of course I am. I go right back to the bar and drink some more.
And I think you talk about white privilege. It's the way that you weave it into your environmental activism and your conscience. And I think that with the drinking, you said where your face started to change, that you were sober for a while, and then something happened to your body was such an interesting description of what happened to your face.
Yeah, what happened was I was drinking secretly without my wife knowing about it. My first wife, Ingrid, you know, I vowed I would never drink again. I was going to meetings, and I was sober a year and a month. So she was convinced I was sober for, the long haul. But I was sneaking in the garage and drinking wine, and that made me sick. So I switched to beer. And I came into the house desperate to get to the shower off to the side, cut out through the living room and get out of her sight. So before she could smell me, get too close. And she dropped a plate of food. She must have been 20 feet away, though, Sandra. It was unbelievable. She said, "You're drinking again. Oh, my God, you're drinking again. Look at you." And I said, okay, I'm drinking. But how could you tell that from 20 feet away? She said, "Your face has changed." So what do you mean my face has changed? "You look like that guy that's trying to get the keys from the dog in the burning jail." "What?" "The guy that's chasing the wench around the fountain." What do you mean? Pirates of the Caribbean? I look like Pirates of the... Yeah, you look like one of those, audio animatronic guys. And I looked in the mirror, and sure enough, there was Roy Disney staring back at me. I looked like one of those, guys from that ride. I just was all puffy and red. I looked like a totally different person. I couldn't believe it.
I mean, and I think also, your acting, I think when Jack Nicholson, you did the scene with Jack Nicholson, and I think you wove the idea of how to act, and I wonder if you could share a little bit of that lesson, which is also related to how people, of when you worked with Jack Nicholson and what he said to you and that told you about acting.
Well, for the first My Three Sons and quite a few years afterwards, I was, kind of conscious of the camera and kind of would, be scared of the camera in some way. And finally, after a few years on this show, Room 222, I was working somewhat regular. I was not a regular, but I was a recurring character, and got to know the crew and the cast and my friend David Jolliffe and Eshamu and Karen Valentine and all those wonderful people. I got relaxed. So I finally was relaxed on camera. And so I, went on for another decade doing that, being relaxed on camera, which of course is totally boring to watch. You don't want to watch someone that's just relaxed on camera. You want to see what's going on, see what character, Joaquin Phoenix is doing next, in the Mask, or what he did in Gladiator, any movie that he's in, or Meryl Streep, what she was doing early in her career as Sophie in Sophie's Choice. What happened to this poor woman? I'd love to know what happened. What does that mean, Sophie's Choice? And then you learn there's something going on that you can't explain. What it is how a character deals with pain. That's what this acting teacher, Roy London, said to me one day. But that was on the set with Jack Nicholson, and he, didn't mince words. I was his friend and got the job because I was his friend, but he wasn't going to take a substandard performance. So after I did the first take or two, he said, "Is that all you're going to give me, Beggs?" And I was devastated. I thought, I'm disappointing my friend. I'm disappointing the man I admire most. Is that all you're going to give me? And like that evening I alluded to out on the Sunset Strip where I got arrested, I turned that adrenaline turned it to my advantage. And suddenly I had something, instead of fear, I made it energy or something. And it was fine. And Jack was happy with what I did because I had some life in my eyes rather than just relaxed. So that was the breakthrough, was courtesy of Jack Nicholson telling me, "Is that all you're going to give me?" And then Roy London telling me what's interesting to watch is how our character deals with pain. And that informed me for the rest of my career. Very good note.
So in terms of mentors, I guess, fatherhood is an interesting theme that also runs in, husbandhood, fatherhood, family, etc. And, your father is a continuing character in your memoir, obviously, and you have the wonderful statement about your father, so beautifully described when you said your father did pretty well for what he was given. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you meant by that sentence and what you want to convey about your father.
Yeah, my father didn't finish second grade. He left school and left his family quite young. So I can't imagine what happened in that household that made him leave the house so young. Probably wasn't something good. So by the time he had me in 1949, my sister the year before, he had grown as a person. He was sober. He had stopped drinking. He was a practicing alcoholic for years, and he drank. He had a relapse when I was about 2 years old, and I wound up calling the police. I just dialed one of those old rotary dials. I dialed the operator and said, "My daddy's not waking up, and I think something's wrong." So they sent the police out. He wasn't dead. He wasn't, sick. He was just drunk, and I couldn't rouse him, but the cops certainly woke him up. And then he got sober again after that, was sober to the day he died. So I tried to be like my father as an actor. I tried to be like him as a parent. He did very, very well, given the way he was raised. Anybody born in 1901 has a very different view of the world. And given what he had seen and what he had, experienced in his family and, in the Navy and other parts of his life, I think he did very, very well. I'm very proud to have him as a dad.
And you yourself are I guess to close, you're the father of many wonderful children, and also you've had many wonderful wives. And I wonder, and you close your book on such a beautiful note that you sleep with you sleep with an ex-wife. If you could just describe that picture, that would be amazing to give us a moment.
Yeah, I set it up. The title of the chapter is "Sleeping with My Ex," and it gives you an impression that I'm going somewhere very different with the tale of sleeping with my ex. But the way it winds up is I have a wonderful wife I'm married to right now, Rochelle Carson, and she's very understanding of my relationship with my dear first wife, who passed away a few years ago. But my children are such wonderful, wonderful people. They gave me her ashes to keep in my study, and I often, sleep in my man cave here. So I wind up sleeping with my ex because she's down, on a bookshelf with a prominent position in my man cave. And I could certainly say with all honesty, I'm still sleeping with my ex. I even did last night.
It's a wonderful, To the Temple of Tranquility and Step on It. It's such a beautiful memoir. It's funny, it's surprising, it's honest, it's fresh, it's full of heart. It's such a delight to read, and everyone should, Samantha, right?
Yes, indeed. Ed, thank you so much for joining us. We loved the book and we loved having you on, and it's just such a thrill. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Samantha. Really a pleasure to talk to you.
We'll see you next time.
I look forward.
Thank you. And now I'm going to take myself off screen and watch the rest from here. So take it away, Samantha.
I will. Thanks again, everybody. Well, now we're going to shift gears. Our next guest is pre-recorded, the amazing crime maven, Patricia Cornwell, that I was lucky enough to share coffee with, as you'll see, the other morning. But let me give a little bit of an intro first. Many of you know the writer Patricia Cornwell's latest novel is Unnatural Death. It's her 29th novel featuring the now beloved character of the medical examiner Kay Scarpetta. Patricia's books have sold more than, get this, 120 million copies in 36 languages. Over a dozen of those have been New York Times bestsellers. Patricia sold her first Kay Scarpetta novel, Postmortem, while she was working as a computer analyst for the medical examiner in Richmond, Virginia. Those of you who've read the books know that features prominently in her work. Postmortem was the first bona fide, and I didn't realize this until I did some research, it was the first bona fide forensic thriller, and that paved the way for the explosion of entertainment we know now, featuring forensics in film and television and, of course, literature. Postmortem actually would go on to win a slew of awards, including the Edgar and the Macavity Awards and the Prix de Roman in France. And that was the first book to ever claim those three distinctions in a single year. In subsequent years, Patricia's fame, of course, has only grown. Her laurels include the Sherlock Award for Best Detective created by an American author, the Gold Dagger Award, the RBA Thriller Award, and the Medal of Chevalier of the Order of the Arts and Letters for her contribution to the literary arts. Check out our interview that happened the other morning. Julie, roll it, please. Welcome, Patricia. It is such a thrill to have you on Bookish.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, yeah, as I said earlier, it's really great to share my morning coffee with one of the finest American crime writers writing today. So thanks again. Listen, we're a newspaper company, and I understand that you began your career as a writer as a newspaper reporter way back in the day.
That was one of the best things I ever did was, I didn't make it happen, but one of the best things that ever happened to me was being a journalist. That really is the key to my approach for how I write my books, is I go out and find a story. I always say, just keep looking for a story until it finds you, but you've got to go out and do things. You need to talk to people. You need to see things for yourself. And just like that inspires you to create a story for a newspaper, it also can inspire you to create a book.
I love that. And in fact, I heard you say on another interview at some point that rather than the old writer axiom, write what you know, you begin to know what you wrote about.
Yes, yes. And go write what you learn and learn what you write. I mean, you have to know something to tell a story. And if you already know something, then you might want to gravitate in that direction, but that doesn't mean you can't find out other things. Just keep going, because there's so much out there. There's so much nuance and curiosity. And, the meaning of the word autopsy, it goes back to the Greek word autopsia, and it means to see for yourself. And that's what a good journalist does, is what a good writer does, or an artist, period. Go look at those mountains, go look at that water, go look at those ruins and see what it says to you.
I love that. And also, I also heard that you don't work from an outline. You begin with, as you would as your own medical examiner, Scarpetta, excuse me. You begin with the evidence and then see where it takes you. What was the evidence? I mean, you have some very intriguing evidence in this new book. So,
Well, things always start with something that makes me curious. And I happened to see a photograph on Twitter over a year ago, and it was a footprint, a big footprint that had been captured by a surveillance camera in a Texas park. And I looked at this thing in the mud, and it was really quite captivating and really rather chilling. And I thought, what is the big fuss about all this? And what would Scarpetta do if she found a footprint like this at a homicide scene, or a scene where people had been, very violently killed? I use the word homicide sparingly, because that assumes it's a human that did it. And at first, in unnatural death, we don't know if it's a human who's responsible for these two campers who have been mauled to death, and killed in the woods. And because a footprint like this is found now, it's not a spoiler to say, fear not, Bigfoot didn't do it. We're not dealing with something silly like that, but there is a Bigfoot component. And I also tell the readers why Bigfoot is being talked about and where he comes from and what's the scientific basis of this mythical creature, because there is one. And so that's been kind of fun, because I got to look into that and I found out all kinds of things I didn't know.
did it change anything about your view of Bigfoot, by the way?
Well, yes, it did. I have two very strong theories about Bigfoot, and they kind of echo what Jane Goodall says about it, the very famous anthropologist, that she says, quote, "I'm not going to say that Bigfoot doesn't exist." And I would echo that. I'm not going to say that Bigfoot doesn't exist either, because there's a very good chance Bigfoot does exist. And there's two reasons why she might exist. One is if this creature wasn't all killed off during the Ice Age, because there was a giant ape called Gigantopithecus that they found fossils of in China. Now, if that creature escaped over the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age and came from Asia to basically from Siberia to Alaska, as they're called today, he could very well have ended up in the wilderness in this country, in North America. There's also a theory that Bigfoot could be more of a spiritual thing that people have encounters with, and Jane Goodall hinted at that also. And it's interesting that in Native American lore, the American Indians, they talk about sometimes this Bigfoot creature being sighted at the same time they would see these very bright orbs in the sky, what we would call UFOs or UAPs today. So we don't know what this is all about, but you know what I always say?
What?
Keep an open mind and don't think you know everything, because there's a lot of stuff we don't know and we don't understand.
I love this because, Kay Scarpetta has been through so much with you. You launched her isn't this your 27th Scarpetta
Yes.
novel? 1990, was that the first?
It was.
You and Kay have been through a whole heck of a lot together, and the world has changed. Can you talk about kind of growing up with this character, if you will? I mean, she's been part of your life for a good part of your life.
Well, yes. I mean, I have grown up with her. I mean, it's more than even 33 years, because she was a minor character in the early books, that the early crime novels I wrote that didn't get published. And so she's been around since really about 1984. God, you realize that's 40 years. I first created her, but she didn't see the light of day until 1990 when Postmortem came out, but that was my fourth attempt. But she's changed over the decades the same way all of us have, because of how the world has changed. And what's interesting is, because of the changes in technology, she has to ask questions that she didn't used to. For example, when she sees the plaster cast that Marino makes of this big footprint that's 18 inches long, this huge thing, and he's got this big old plaster of Paris cast that he made. When she's looking at this thing, what is real as it is, what wouldn't have been true back in the early days of her career is true now, which is the following. There is 3D printing that you could do, that you could create a realistic looking prosthetic device. You could print it in your own house and go out and leave a big footprint. You could scan a footprint off the internet and have 3D print a plastic rubbery prosthetic thing. And so you have to consider, is that what someone did here and this has been faked? Or is there some other reason? Or is this real? But even if it's real, does that mean Bigfoot was there when those two people were killed? And you know what else you have to look for is, you got to look for trace evidence in that footprint. Like, what about pollen that might have been for a certain time of year? And if it's inside this gold mine where the footprint is found, how do you know when that footprint was left? It may have been left a long time ago. You don't know.
It's just so fascinating to me. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you
No, I'm
off.
just saying and these are the things that she has to consider today, just like we would if we were out in that uninhabited forest land and we came across that same footprint inside an old gold mine.
So writing has always kept you in the loop of technology and police procedurals. It's always been a learning process for you in the course of producing all of these books, more than 40 books.
Well, yeah, if you add up everything I've done, it's over 40 books that I've published, in my career so far. And yes, I do have to keep up with these things. And that's what's fun, though, because when you find a new technology, and you'll see what one of these new technologies, when you get to the end of the book, and I'm not going to give hints about it, but it's something that's real and it's going to blow your mind when you see it, and especially when you know it's real. And when I find out these things, I go, oh, now what am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
And that's what's fun. You find some little piece or part of something, and the story it can tell because of what the microscope tells you, and what chemical analysis tells you, and what measurements tell you. And always pieces and parts, what we call trace evidence, which is one of my favorite things, because there's some very strange trace evidence that Scarpetta picks up in this case too, in a natural death. Like, what on earth did this come from? How do you explain this?
Can I ask a question? I read somewhere that at one point you actually considered that maybe you were at the end of novel writing, and the pandemic perhaps changed your mind. Can you talk a little bit about that? What keeps bringing you back to the novel form?
Well, it's kind of like the only ride in the amusement park that I seem to have the admission for. That's the only ticket I seem to get to is the writing novel ride. And it is true that I quit after the Scarpetta book Chaos came out in 2016. And I just thought, you know what, I don't have any new ideas for this anymore. And I mean, I don't know what's left to do with Scarpetta unless I put her on the moon. I literally said that to somebody. Be careful what you say.
I was just going to say that because
I'm not sure that Scarpetta and the moon are done yet. I'm just telling you, I don't think I have this funny feeling down the road that we're going to have some lunar epiphany with her. But let's stay where we are right now. And so I quit in 2016. I said, you know what, I'm going to switch to television and movies and see if I can do things with these folks. And I started playing around with all of that. And then I got interested in outer space. And I was going to do a film, I thought, but once again, they just wanted me to write books. And so I ended up doing 2 space thrillers that came out after the Scarpetta book, the last one. And then COVID hit, and everything was really grinding to a halt. And I thought to myself, and there's so much civil unrest and so many problems in America that were coming to fruition at that point with Donald Trump taking office and all that. And I thought, what would Scarpetta do in this world right now? First of all, what is she going to do with COVID? What is she going to do with, we're on the verge of civil war in the United States. And I thought, where is she? I need to imagine where she is. And in my mind, I went and talked to her. I basically found her sitting in her garden at a wrought iron table in Northern Virginia, where she lives right now. I imagined it in somewhat light filtering through these trees. It was like springtime or summer. And she's sitting at her table. I don't know what she's doing. Very quiet. You know, she's a mysterious, quiet person. She doesn't say all that much. And I basically said, wondering if you might want to do another case.
Seriously?
And she basically said, well, maybe. Depends on what it is. Come back to me with some information and we'll talk. You know, and that was it. And I thought, okay, well, here we go. And now I got to see if she's going to show up or not. And she didn't at first. I literally opened Autopsy, the one that came out two books before this one. I thought I was going to put her on the International Space Station. I opened it in outer space where she was dealing with a death up there that happened out on a spacewalk. And she drifted around, floating around a little bit up there, and she would not cooperate. And I finally realized what she was saying is, I tell you what, I'll work a death in outer space, but I prefer to work it from the ground. If you want to go up there, you go right ahead, but I don't need to be up there to do this.
I love it.
So she worked in outer space death in Autopsy, but she did it from the Situation Room at the White House. She did it remotely. And so that was when she came back, and how here we are, where she's going after trying to figure out why there's a big footprint where these two people have been killed. And by the way, they weren't nice people. They were wanted for tremendous cyber fraud and other things. And so that adds to the mystery of who might have done this to them. What's happening here? And by the way, what did this to them is a lot worse than Bigfoot.
Well, they certainly got their comeuppance because they really get skewered, as it were, literally get skewered.
Yeah, they do.
They do. I love that you were talking about Kay Scarpetta as if she's a person, because she is a person. She's someone you have created all of these years. And I love it when fiction writers talk about their characters talking to them. She literally talks to you.
Well, she rarely actually talks to me. There was just that one time where I sought her audience in her garden, as crazy as it sounds.
No, I get it.
But it really wasn't crazy, because it had been several years and I had done things. I had the new Jack the Ripper book that had come out. I had Quantum that came out. I had Spin that came out, and lots of other things I was doing. And I had to see if she would still get conjured up or not. Could I still do it? Would she talk to me? Whoever she is. And so in my mind, I imagined respectfully asking her permission. I didn't just assume. And that may sound crazy, but I don't know who or what this character is. She's not me. She might be an alter ego, but she's not me, and she's not anybody I've ever really met. She may be a combination of people I've met, but she's also very unique on her own. And so I just let her be what she is. And I kind of consider myself like an electrical conduit.
Conduit for this
Let
character.
it come through and let her be what she wants to be, and don't really think you own her, because you don't own anything. Nobody does.
You know, she was, I didn't realize this until I was doing a little bit of research, but she was one of the first medical examiner characters in crime fiction that we saw in the early 90s. And now there are many of them. I'm just wondering about how you feel about your influence and Kay Scarpetta's influence on crime fiction.
Well,
Because she's had some.
Scarpetta was the first crime fiction medical examiner that I know of. And really the only one in the entertainment business, except for Quincy, who was Quincy was just coming out about the time I started doing the research at the morgue. I mean, I think I watched it a couple times, Quincy. I didn't pay any attention to it really, but I remember it. But you know, most people don't even know who that is anymore, with Jack Klugman playing Quincy. But a funny story about that, when Demi Moore wanted to play Scarpetta long ago, and I was working out with her and her trainer in 1992 in Malibu.
Oh,
and
that
let me
must
tell
have
you
been
what,
fun.
That was, do not work out with Demi Moore and her trainer unless you really want to get your butt kicked, is all I have to say. But we were jogging along Pacific Coast Highway, and this figure's walking towards us, going the other way, and it's Jack Klugman, and he walks right past the two of us. And I said to Demi, "Well, the old Quincy just passed the new one." Well, I meant her because she was going to do it at that time, and that things didn't work out. But anyway, there wasn't anything. The closest that we might have come with P.D. James, the British
Sure.
writer. She was a lot more into forensics and medical detail than most people had seen, but nobody went to this extent. And I couldn't have had I not ended up working in the medical examiner's office for 6 years and then continuing the research ever since. It just wouldn't be possible. It's too complicated.
It's interesting to me, when you first started, crime fiction wasn't quite in the zeitgeist like it is now. It's such a popular form of literature. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on maybe the danger of popularity. I heard you say once that you're cautious not to celebrate what should be condemned.
I say that and I maintain that. And when you do things when I do something from Scarpetta's point of view, it's never going to be celebrated. The safety is her point of view. And I learned that the hard way when I did 3 or 4 books that deviated from that. And I wrote them from the third person point of view, and it was she instead of I. And people didn't like it. And it took me a while to figure out why they didn't like it, because they want to be her when she's doing things. And they also feel safe when she's there. As long as you are with her and holding her hand and looking at something through her eyes, you are okay. Even when you're in the cooler or over that body or at a crime scene where something awful has happened, you're okay if she's there. And so that is what's, so I know that is the key to what I do. And it will also, I hate to use the word, but it will be moral, if you want to use a word like that. It will not abuse something that should not be abused. But truth be told, I think today people are drawn to crime stories for some of the same reasons, but some different ones. I think that, you got to remember what makes us interested in crime is our survival instinct. If we can figure out what happened to somebody or something, then maybe we can avoid that same dreadful outcome. Well, we have a lot more to fear this day and age than we ever have. It's not just sharks, and it ain't Bigfoot. It's the person that decides to shoot up the shopping mall.
Yep.
It's the person that decides to home invade. There's so many. It's terrorists that decide to storm a theater while you're there watching a performance, and next thing you know, their guns being fired. So we're studying all this. We want to know. This is part of learning. And kid yourself not. When you are watching a really good crime series on TV or a crime movie, or you're reading a really good crime novel that's teaching you some things, it's not all made up stuff, you are learning more about how to adapt to this crazy, dangerous world we live in. But it's a safe way to do it and a fun way to do it. A lot better than listening to police lectures about what's going to kill you on your drive home.
No kidding. Well, listen, Patricia, thank you. I could talk to you all day, but alas, we can't. Thank you for being with us, folks. Unnatural Death is her latest. Pick it up. Brilliant work as always. Thank you, Patricia, and I hope you come back.
Thank you. I'd love to come back. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Well, there we go, folks. Thank you again, speaking of thanks, for joining us tonight. And thanks, Ed, and thanks, Sandra, who beamed off, and Patricia, of course. Also, thanks to our production manager, the genius behind the curtain, Julie Corlett. It wouldn't happen without her. And don't forget, copies of today's books are available at our partner, Once Upon a Time bookstore. We're going to be back in January for a preview of the exciting Writers Week at UC Riverside. But meanwhile, if you'd like to share your thoughts from today, or if you have additional questions, please email us at events@scng.com. And if you want to give me any notes directly on the show, reach me at sdunn@scng.com. And don't forget, you don't have to wait very long for until our next show for great content on books. Sign up for books editor Eric Peterson's Book Pages weekly newsletter. And speaking of Eric, here is a message from him on what we've got coming up on our newspapers.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on. This weekend, we have an interview with the author of Starkweather. I hope you'll check that out. The book is really interesting. It kind of takes a fresh look at an old crime and makes some really interesting points. We've got that. Also, we've got a roundup that ran in the book pages. So if you read the book pages, you might be familiar with it. It is a roundup of some great nonfiction graphic novels that you can check out. And also in today's book pages that is coming out, there's an interview with a local bookseller who has won an award and also has some interesting news. And there is a holiday book buying helpful guide in case you don't know what to buy somebody. Check this out. This may give you some ideas. That's about everything I've got. Thanks and take care.
Happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next year. Bye now.